Look what I have here. I don't know if you can see it. It's probably a reincarnation of a Kremlin staff member. Actually, I wouldn't attribute that negativity. It's just such a little beautiful creature. I'm going to put him down gently over here by my off-grid home. And let's go. We're going to talk about Russia as a pink sheet stock. A pink sheet is a penny stock. And if you know what a price is, a price under Austrian theory is a subjective intertemporal point in which buyers and sellers at the margin express in an open exchange what they would give up in order to buy or sell that asset. So if Russia is an asset, like a stock, what is its valuation? First, you're going to say, oh, Russia is not actually a stock. It's probably more on par with an ETF or an index fund because it's a conglomeration of companies. Some go belly up, some go, are making a little bit of a profit. I disagree because it's more on par with a company that has a series of shell corporations that are ghost companies or non-existent, and they all roll up to the Kremlin. I know there's this idea of a super brain out there. That means AI will eventually evolve until there's one dominant AI model. And that AI model is the super brain. It's like a computer program that solves the game of chess. There's nothing more to discuss. It understands all the nuances of the game. So if it's the Kremlin's idea, the guy in the Kremlin, the Tsar, if he could, in his quest for immortality, either through the history books in his own delusions or physical immortality, he would immerse himself in that AI superbrain in some sort of dystopian, technological science fiction fantasy, and then rule the world forever. So my point being, the argument is Russia, as it exists today in its despotic form, is one entity. It's not a series of companies. It's not a series of roll-up. It's a roll-up all to the big, parent company. And everything and every entity and every business activity underneath it is a child activity in the corporate speak, corp org speak. So what values a company? Let's say the par value of Russia, if it was an entity, was 100 in 2021 at the year end. Okay, December 31st. Let's say, and that's, even that's a stretch, but let's say the par value. What would you personally value this asset today as a, again, subjective, not an objective intrinsic value based on mineral wealth or something? What would be the valuation you would put to it? My argument is I was a former stock, broker as well as currently a PhD economist. And my idea is stocks and assets are valued on price to earnings, expected price to earnings momentum. Okay, it's always connected to the earnings of the company, but also valuation of the future, ongoing concern. You could look at technical analysis, 200-day moving average. So this valuation of Russia has to be based on that. I mean, we can talk about GDP and economic indicators, which again, I maintain are just top-down information flowing directly from the Kremlin. They're never going to say Russian GDP is at negative 4.9%, like I maintain. They always have to keep it positive, the Russian central bank. And they'll squeak the interest rates down a little bit and say, we're growing at 1%. It's not. Look at it from an investor standpoint. Would you personally buy a stock called the despotic country of Russia? And if you would, what would be your valuation? Okay, so the first thing you want to know is that it's basically a sin stock. Or not basically, it's like the ultimate sin stock. And if you know what a sin stock is, it's things that have moral, questionable activities that I personally don't invest in, and you probably wouldn't either. Even if the margins or the expected margins are tempting, I wouldn't touch it. I believe in making humanity a better place. I'm going to put my money and investments in things that make this world a better place. So let's say let's say that first of all gives it a discount. And, the percentage discount, you may say, might be 20%. There's a degree or a substantial number of buyers that are not gonna touch it, even if it was a viable ongoing concern. But at that, let's rebrand it and, put blinders on and say this despotic country of Russia rebrands and re-releases under the name of something like Puppies and Ice Cream Inc., okay? Or Inc. is even bad. Puppies and Ice Cream Partnership. What would be the valuation you would pay for that? First of all, the earnings momentum is down, it's negative cash flow, and accelerating negative earnings momentum. That's a huge indicator. It doesn't even have a price to earnings ratio and an expected price to earnings ratio. You have kinetic sanctions, you have the US sanctions potentially coming into play. I don't know when that will come into play. I I know in DC there's like a masterful political delay and theater going on. It may not even come into play until, who knows, October, and it may be diluted down. So let's say that this actually does come into play. That's further pressure on sanctions. You've got kinetic sanctions, oil sanctions, but you can't look at this like in terms of mineral wealth. You have to look at the balance sheet in terms of income, ability to float financing. And there's no ability to float financing currently because they've gone to auction several times or attempted test auctions, and no free market buyers purchased their debentures, right? So only if it's a forced non-free market price, which is not really a price. A price isn't a price if it's forced. It's got to be this free market, voluntary, entrepreneurial calculation. So the Russians don't have the ability to raise capital. Then the stock market itself, equity market, that speaks for itself, is crashing. They don't have income, negative earning momentum. Demographics, it's like 1.4 to 1.5, I would say. The replacement ratio, that means more people are leaving this earth in Russia than are being replaced. So future generations are going to have a severe demographic issue. And that is something which you calculate when you're looking at an ongoing concern, a company. It would be like if you look, oh, maybe I want to work for company XYZ. And on the online reviews, there's these online review sites. There's only like a 1.7 rating. People, are just trashing it. And now you say, oh, but there's no publicity. They scour the internet. They have these people reputation builders in Russia that would remove any negative reviews. So you wouldn't see that. But everybody knows what's going on. Maybe people who have already left this earth, like the 1.5 million Russians or whatever, in recent years for whatever reason, write a metaphysical online review, and it feeds into the collective unconsciousness of humanity. So everybody knows they don't want to work for that company. That company is not an ongoing concern. So what are the percentage of companies that fail on a penny stock, that go to the pink sheets, that trade OTC? Between 60 and 80% just absolutely go to NT. When I was a stockbroker, I was looking at a stock and I was asking my friend, what is NT? Not traded, okay? And then you get these zombie stocks that just trade indefinitely or exist there, but there's no activity on them. And then maybe like 5% or less recover. And I wouldn't give Russia even that 5% going to recover, window or flattery. So if I were to value Russia as a stock, not something that you think it should say, like, oh, if a par was 100 in 2020, at the end of 2023, December 31st, cut the financial year-end books, look at it, what would it be today? Maybe 60% valuation, $60. There's not a chance I would put $60 into that. I wouldn't even put a penny, maybe a fraction of a penny. Some grocia. You say, well, grocia, penny's not worth any value unless you want to buy something and you're a penny short. But so pennies do have some value. So I don't even think it's a penny. That's me personally. I'm just being honest as an entrepreneur. And if I have, something that I think that Russia will recover, come back, I have all this money, let's say I don't, but that is the ultimate acid test for a stock's valuation, what you personally would pay for it. And based on all the economic indicators, the technical elves, the stocks, bond, typical fundamental analysis of earnings and the way it's going, the destruction of the infrastructure, the destruction of the capital, and what is the product it produces? Does it produce anything good for humanity? Or you could even, usually a company tries to satiate whether you believe in capitalism or not. I'm kind of an unrepentant capitalist with caveats, but it tries to satiate a consumer demand, something that consumers like, whether it be books, whether it be food, whether it be transport or communication. These aren't, or entertainment, these aren't bad things. Okay, they just make life on the planet Earth a little bit more tolerable. But what would be the product that Russia produces? That's the question. You could say oil and gas. I don't even know if that's a good product anymore. The way it, climate change and all that. I'll probably get you guys will flame me in the comments, but I believe in the future of humanity and we have brains and we can problem solve in better ways. So what is the valuation? I don't know. I would say NT, not traded. I would put it at that. I wouldn't even trade the stock. I wouldn't even purchase it. And maybe there's some, junk men going to the junkyard looking for scraps and hoping that this 1/10 of a penny stock called Russia will double and be 2/10 of a penny. But I'm not, I'm not going to waste my time on that. There's an opportunity cost and there's much better investments. So that is really good evidence that Russian economy is collapsing. The Russian economy is going down and it's not going to recover. And in the short term, or if you look at the demographics and the infrastructure and the capital structure in the long term, simply not on aggregate GDP numbers, and a lot of times I look at microeconomics analysis, but on your own personal subjective evaluation. Would you buy a stock called the despotic country of Russia, and how much of your hard-earned money would you put into that? I wouldn't put any. Russia's going down, not traded, falling off the pink sheets, OTC pink sheets. My name is Mark Barnott. I'm a former stockbroker and a monetary economist. Have a beautiful day. Thank you very much.